Hi, if you bought one of my mock-ups from my Etsy store, Michelle's Mocktique, or you're just looking to understand a little bit more about Photoshop files for mock-ups, then this tutorial is for you. So let's get started. Welcome to Making Merch with Michelle, helping you design, sell, and scale your print-on-demand business. If you are doing print on demand or you're just listing your t-shirts for sale, then you're probably familiar with doing mock-ups. So this tutorial is about Photoshop mock-ups specifically, and if you're going to use them for loading into MyDesigns, we'll go over that part as well. So let's take a look and see what we have here. So when you bought the mock-up, you were probably given a link to go and download a zip file to use in Photoshop. And so your zip file should look something like this. Depending on your computer, it opens different ways, but let's open this up and see what we have. So within this folder, you should see at least 3 documents. It may vary a little bit depending on the mockup that you bought. But this example kind of applies to just about all the mockups in my store. You will see 2 PSD files, one that has the word Heather in it and the other that does not have Heather, and then some instructions too, so you can have some readable instructions available as you're using this as well. The reason you have both of a Heather and a non-Heathered file is that if you are using them in MyDesigns, you can load both of them up and be able to select whether your shirt is a Heathered product or not a Heathered product. It's real easy to use in the publishing process, and I'll show you a little bit more about that as we go through the tutorial. I did want to start though with just a good overview of what are the pieces of the PSD file, because if you want to do any modifications or you want to print them out as a JPEG, then I just wanted to show you all those components there. So let's take a look at these files and we will dive into what the Photoshop piece of it is. And I use Photoshop a lot, but there is a free alternative that you can use called Photopea or Photopia. I'm never really sure what's the right way to say that. If you know, just let me know in the comments down below. Do 1 for Photopia and 2 for Photopea, or 3 if you think it's even something else. But it is a nice free version of Photoshop, and it really has a lot of the same features. So if you use Photoshop or use Photopea, then this tutorial should apply fairly well. There may be a few differences, but mostly it should be the same. So let's go ahead and open our Photoshop file. Make that a little bit smaller for us. And let's review all of the different components to this file. So let's take a look at each of these layers, and I have kind of gave them color coding so that you have a little bit more understanding of which ones you can manipulate and which ones you should maybe just leave alone and not do anything to. One of the main components of working with layers in Photoshop is that you have this little toggle here, this little eye symbol, and you can toggle things on and off to be visible or not. And so you see right now, you see the necklace, but if I toggle that off, then the necklace is gone. Toggle it back on and it's there. For example, the background, I can toggle off, background's gone. So that's one of the main things that are going to adjust what your files actually look like. Let's start with the little sections that are in orange here. Basically, anything in orange is kind of optional, so you have the option of turning it on and off, and it usually has it listed here too as being optional. Looks like I need to add that to my Gildan tag as well here. And that way you know which ones are easy to change or not. So for example, if you don't want to use the necklace in your mockups, you can just toggle it off. If you don't want to use the hat, you can toggle that off. If you don't want to use the wheat that's sticking up, you can toggle that off. And then you can even toggle off the background, or you can change to a different background. We can talk about that too in a minute here. And then I did add in here the ability to toggle on and off whether you have a Bella and Canvas tag or a Gildan tag. Some people like the tags on their shirt, some people don't. And honestly, I know this is just a t-shirt, a white t-shirt. I'm pretty sure it's a Gildan t-shirt, but those are so similar when you're looking at mockups like this, you can really use them for either one. So if you prefer the Bella and Canvas tag, you can leave this tag on. If you prefer the Gildan, you can toggle this one on instead. It's up to you. Or if you'd rather not have a tag at all, you can toggle those off also. Okay, so that is your optional layers. And if you don't like this background, you can bring in another background as well. So just bring it in as a JPEG and make sure you put it down here to the bottom. And you can see again, you can toggle that background on and off. So you can use different backgrounds if you want to create other mockups out of this Photoshop file. Okay, I'm going to leave the necklace and the hat and the weed on because I kind of like that for the aesthetics of this mockup. Okay, then you have the purple layers here that you see. One of them says MD image front, and then you have a heather effect and MD color shirt. Now those are very specific for MyDesigns, but you can use them as well as if you're just going to print a JPEG of your mockup. What the color area does is it will actually change the color of the shirt for us. The heather effect, if you apply it, gives it just a little bit of a heather tone to the shirt. And then the MD image front, this is actually is kind of the placeholder where the image goes. And you can see if I toggle that off, the placeholder disappears as well. And we're going to talk about how you actually update that with your image or how the function works when it goes over to MyDesigns. Okay, and then the last section to talk about are the red sections, and those are red because don't want to do anything with them. This is the most important part that you do not want to mess with. Each of these sections is actually designed to give you the different highlights and screens, the effects that you need to make the shirt look correct when you change the colors to that. And so they are all set together in a certain way, and you do not want to mess with those. But to show you a little bit more about what I mean, I'm going to toggle off each one of these top shirt ones for a minute, the screen, the highlight, and the shadow. And notice how my shirt then just turns just a very faded out white, and it's just it's not usable as a design. I'll turn the color off for a second too. Here's the core base shirt underneath all of this, and that's what everything is built from. But when you add that color layer, that's when you get this washed out look. So then you have to kind of add the shadows and the highlights and the screen that gives you all those extra effects to make it look as much as possible like a real t-shirt. So basically, you don't want to hide these layers and you don't want to move these layers. So just make sure you leave anything in the red, leave those parts alone. Okay. So how do we make the shirt look like what we need for the different colors? Let's go over that part first. Remember I said that this layer here is MD color dash shirt, and let's toggle that back on for a minute. You see it right now, it's set to white. And this one has to be titled for MyDesigns. It has to be titled MD-color because that is what MyDesigns recognizes. So it will update the colors for you. So as long as you start with a white t-shirt and you load this file into MyDesigns, then it will update the colors for you as long as you have this color layer identified. So how do you change the color of the shirt? Well, you have the nice little color palette here right beside the MD color shirt. And so make sure that you're clicking into this thumbnail with the color palette. Just double click right into that area and you're going to bring up your color picker. Now notice if I change the colors, there you go. All my colors will update to whatever color that you're looking for. That's a pretty green there actually. So you have two options here. You can kind of pick and choose whatever works for you, but you can also use the hex code here. And I kind of recommend looking up the hex code because that will give you the most accurate code from the manufacturer's perspective. There's a lot of websites out there. If you just Google Gildan hex code or Bell and Canvas hex codes, and then you can find them, and you can just put those directly in here. Maybe I'll try to add a reference somewhere in my documents as well to take you to where the hex codes are. But so, for example, we know our classic one for black is 000000. See if I put the hex code in there, then it turns to black for us. So I would recommend that you do use the hex codes, or not, you can just kind of move around the screen as well. So let me put her back to black for just a minute. Now notice the shirt is not like really, really solid looking black, and you don't want it to be like overwhelmingly black. You need to kind of have that fine line between making it look more natural and realistic. I may need to actually turn that down just a little bit though, and see if we can bring it in just slightly. So that's a good point for you as well. If you're noticing the color maybe is a little off or it's a little brighter or lighter than you need, you can kind of adjust the opacity of the screen layer. That will kind of bring back the visual of it. So if you click on the screen layer, up at the top is opacity, and you'll notice it's very small right now to start with. But if you take that up, it does get a little more faded looking. bring it back down and you make it a little closer to your color. Take it down too far though, and you start to wash out all of the image a little bit, and then you don't see all the details of the shirt. So let's keep this one on about 10. I think that's a good starting point for us. But if you do notice some differences, then it is okay to kind of adjust the opacity. I would only probably do that with the screen layer though. That one is the one that will affect it the most for you. Okay, so now that we've decided we want the black t-shirt here, let's bring up a gray t-shirt for just a minute, and I'll show you what the heather effect looks like. If you want to apply the heather, that's what this little section is here, and it's just kind of a speckled image to put over top of it, and so when you turn it on, it does kind of give just that little subtle heather look on the t-shirt as well. Not too strong, but again, this is another area that you can adjust the opacity a little bit. If you want a little more heather, you can take it up, bring the opacity back up a little bit, or a little less heather, you can take it back down. I tend to like to keep it around the 70 mark though. I think that works pretty well for the heather effect. I want to point out specifically why these two screens have the little arrow here. Basically, these are called clipping mask. And so what that is doing is it's the layer above is only being applied to the shape of the layer below. So what do I mean by that? Let me turn off those layers for just a second. And I'm going to turn off the background too for just a second. Notice your shirt here is by itself, that's the layer for the shirt. See, let me toggle these off too for a second. You can see just the shirt here. This is the layer that I'm working for the clipping mask. Now, if I undid that clipping mask, when I toggle on the layer, you're going to get a solid screen now. It's going to cover the entire layer because the clip and mask is not turned on. So you don't see the shirt at all in this setup. A lot of this you can just right click on and see all the different menu options for it. But I'm going to create the clip and mask again, put that back on, make sure I put it back on for the heather layer as well. So now you see that it applies to the image that is directly below it. And that's going to be essential to have all of our effects and our colors look correct. So let's turn on all of our other layers too, and we're back to looking like a t-shirt again. Here's the heather effect. If you want to take another closer look at that, let's make that a little bit big so you can just for a second see that heather effect on here. See how subtle, how makes just that little bit of difference there for it. Okay. All right, so now we've gone over how to set up your t-shirt, have it ready to go. We've talked about all the optional pieces that you can do that are in orange, the areas that you don't want to bother that are in red. The only thing you might want to do is change the opacity on the screen layer, but for the most part, you're going to leave the red ones alone. And I'm going to turn my background back on as well. That gray is not the best color for that background, so this is a good reason why it's nice to be able to change that background if you need to as well. So let's do this pretty maroon color for now. So the last thing we want to talk about now, how do I get my design on here? I've gone over all these pieces and parts. I have this ugly looking square in the middle. How do I turn that into my design so that I can use this as a mock-up? So this part is a little tricky, but it's really not that bad once you understand the premise of it. So let's go over how you do that. So remember again, this is the layer up here. It says MD image front. And again, MyDesigns is going to need that MD-image language so that it knows what layer you want to apply your design to, and it will automatically do that for you. Remember here, where I toggle it off, you don't see the layer, toggle it on, you do see the layer. Now, this is called a smart object layer. So down in this little bitty corner, you see where it says smart object thumbnail. So that is the part that makes this a smart object. And so that is essential to understanding how this piece works. So what you actually want to do is double click right on that smart object. And notice that it brought up another layer, another file here at the top. So let's close that back out and I'll show you again what I'm talking about here. So notice when we start, we only have one file up here at the top of the screen. If I double click on that smart object icon, now we have two files that show up. And this opens up that specific layer in another screen. And this is where we can actually add our design. Now again, if you'll notice, if I toggle this off, you won't see the design image, and toggle it back on again. So how do you add your design? Well, there's a couple of things you could do. You can go to File and Import for example. But basically you want to add your graphic to this screen. The way that I like to do it the best is to just drag and drop my file. So I have a little graphic I saved for us, just a little something to use as an example. And so I like to just be able to drag, drop it right in, boom, it's ready to go for you. So remember, this square is kind of the exact placement of where your t-shirt printing dimensions are. So that is a good way for you to know exactly where do I put this image. Usually we'll have it towards the top of the screen, and you want to adjust the side a little bit, not too big, not too small. I will say I am constantly debating on what is the exactly correct size. And so there's a lot of tutorials out there about that. Maybe that's another video I'll do at some point as well. But from your experience, you want to put this design graphic exactly where you want it to appear. Now I'm going to leave, and once you have it set, you always have to do your little check mark, by the way. I want to leave this bottom layer on for just a second because I want to show you what happens when we add this layer to it. So right now you have both layers. Now, how do you get it to show up over here? Currently you don't see anything but the main layer we started with. But when you save this layer, just by going to File Save or Control S, either one, when you save that layer and see it saving, now when I go back over here, you see my graphic image is displaying now on the shirt. But you don't want to see this big background as well. So that's the piece that I wanted to really point out to you. How do we make it so it's just the graphic? Well, it's really pretty easy. Let's go back to our design layer and toggle off that bottom piece now. And see, now it's a nice transparent layer. Again, position it exactly where you want it to be on your t-shirt and hit save. When you hit save, you see it saving. Let's go back to your main layer. Voila, then your image is on your shirt and ready to go. Let's point out a couple little things on here about this design. If you'll notice, the necklace is over top of the design. That is definitely done on purpose so that it looks a little bit more realistic. That is happening because your necklace is the very top layer here. So remember, if I toggle this on and off, it's my top layer. If that was underneath here, underneath our image, then it actually goes below it, and we don't want that. So you wanted some of the Photoshop files. Now it depends on how your file that you purchased is set up, but if it is something that's on the top, that is so that it is above that design layer. And again, you can toggle that on and off if you don't want to use that piece of it. The image layer is also set with just a little less opacity, and that is to make it a little more natural looking when you print out your graphic to use as your mock-up. So just to show you the difference, if I turn it all the way up, you see how it's a little brighter and it just doesn't look like it's part of the shirt. It looks like it's more just sitting on the shirt. So take that down a little bit. You can take it up or down a little more depending on, what you prefer. But I like to keep it probably around 85 to 90 on average. Some people take it down a little bit more. Maybe it depends on what the image is. But now you can tell it kind of just blends into that image a little bit more. So now you have your image, you have your color, you have everything you need to use this as your mock-up. And you can just print this as a JPEG file and use it with whatever listing photo or however you want to use it. It's ready to go. So let's talk about how we do that. It's pretty simple on this one. You can do File. I like to just go to File, Export, Export As. And you can save this as a PNG or a JPEG depending on what your needs are. But for a mock-up photo, you typically do JPEG and then hit export. So let's see where we want to save it. I'm just going to save it on my desktop now in my working files that I've been showing you here. And I'll save it there. Now you have your JPEG. Let's open that up a little bit so you can see a little more. And you have your mock-up that's ready to go basically as a JPEG. And the good thing is that now we can just use this file over and over again to do other mock-ups, other colors, other designs, whatever you need to add to it. But there's your mock-up, all pretty and ready to go. One of the questions you may have too, though, is maybe I don't want this size of mock-up. Maybe I don't want a horizontal. Maybe I'd rather have the square mock-up. And if you're familiar with Etsy at all, you know that they seem to change every few months of what they prefer your mock-up to be. I've kind of given up on it and I try to just go with square most of the time, but I have changed my philosophy back and forth a few times as well. So if you want a square one, you can actually just crop this mock-up when you get it in Etsy as an option, or if you're always going to use square ones. So if you prefer to do it in the Photoshop file, you can actually just go to your crop option. You can set your ratio here to square, and then just have your image wherever you need it to be. You can still move it around and stuff if you need to. Let's see, let's get a little bit more centered. And when you hit the plus button, you'll notice now all your layers are still here exactly the way you need them to be, but it's a little closer up now and a square image, and it still looks really good in proportions to all of the pieces that are placed in here. I try to make my mock-ups so that you can use them either as more of the horizontal view or the landscape view. Sorry, I said horizontal a minute ago. More of the landscape view that's a little wider, or you can do it square, and it should apply very easy either way. So you could just export it now as a square image. And if you don't want to keep any of these changes that you made, when you close this file, just make sure that you don't save anything and it kind of just goes back to what it was. I'm just going to undo that one for now, that crop for now, because I tend to leave it a little bit more open. So let's go back to my landscape view here. Okay. All right, so you do have that option to be able to change that. Now, if you're all done or you're ready to use maybe another image, you can go back to your file as well. You can update this image with anything you want. You hit save, go back, your image will be here. When you're done and you want to kind of have everything back to the base of where it was, what I like to do is just turn my placeholder image back on and delete my graphic. And remember, as soon as you hit save, you are going to go back to whatever you're seeing on that second screen. That's called a PSD file, by the way. So that second layer that shows your design area, it's called a PSD file. So once I've saved it and I have it kind of back to square one, you can close that PSD file. And then you can also close out your mock-up if you don't want to save any changes, and that way it's fresh and back to the original mock-up that you downloaded. Sometimes it might be a good idea to save a copy, so you always have the original in case you do get in here and mess anything up. Save a copy of your mock-up, the original that you opened up in your files, and that way you have it for reference if you ever need to reopen again, or just go back to the link and download it fresh again. And if you have any trouble, please just reach out to me and let me know, and I'll see what I can do to help you. Okay, so I think we have now gone over all of the details of how to use the PSD files, the Photoshop files. Again, you can do this in Photopea as well. There's very, very similar, and I think all this functionality that we went over is in that as well, so it shouldn't be a problem. And again, you can modify these to whatever fits your needs. If you want to make a few little changes, if you don't like the wheat, that's why I gave you a few optional options in here too to work with. So you have some options. You can actually do all of your graphic work just like we went over here. Add your graphic, export as a JPEG, or if you prefer to do all of your mock-up work in Canva because it's a little quicker and easier to use, but you just need the images of the different colored shirts, then that's fine to just turn off this graphic placeholder, make the changes to the colors, and just download these as JPEGs without the graphic attached, and then you can use them in Canva or whatever tool that you prefer to use your mockups in. But you have the ability to make different mockups for your different colors. So maybe you need a mauve mockup, maybe you need a blue mockup, maybe you need the black one. They're all here then so that you can just add your colors and download those JPEGs and use them in any other tool that you'd like to use for your mockups. Okay. Now that we've gone over all that, I'm going to put this back to white, and I'm also going to turn my bella tag on and my necklace. All my optional things are on, and let's put the image back here. So for MyDesigns, now like I said, you can actually load these directly into MyDesigns immediately as they are. You don't have to make any changes to them, but I did want you to know what all of these layers are in case you do want to make some modifications to the files that you use in MyDesigns. So I'm going to just actually close this out. Let me save it and close it, and let's talk about MyDesigns now. Okay, so let me bring back up my files here, and let's go back to, again, we had the initial zip file, and when we open the zip file, it contains these different layers. Now, of course, this one's just for instructions to tell you a little bit more about the mockups, how to use them in Photoshop, and how to load them to MyDesigns. But again, remember I said that we have two different files here. We have one that is heathered and one is not heathered. And so that is just a matter of that toggle for heather is turned on in this file and it's turned off in this file. Other than that, these files are exactly the same and they're ready to go to load into MyDesigns. So let's grab MyDesigns over here real quick. So now that we're in MyDesign and we're in my listing section here, how do I get my new mockups to work on these listings? And you know how you go to the mockup section here on the side to add an image mockup, for example, and you have all the public ones that automatically come up here. But you want to use your custom design as well. So how do I get it to be in these custom mockups? It's not hard to do at all. It's really pretty simple. So let's go over how we do that. Okay. Instead of this mockup section here that is next to the listing work, go over here to the side panel where you have the bigger sections of things, and there is another one for mockups, and this is where your custom mockups are held. So let's click on that mockup and you'll see all the different custom mockups. So how do we get them in MyDesigns? It's pretty simple. Let's go up here to upload mockup and let's go choose a mockup. I am going to make sure I'm on working files, open the folder that contains the mockups that I'm looking for, and just double click. Now it's a little bit slow. It takes a couple seconds to actually upload, but notice this first screen is just kind of some basic information about the mockups themselves. And here's the important part where we were talking about the MD image, MD color, and you can actually add an MD text layer as well. It's not one I use quite as often though. The image and the color is what I use most. And it will go through here and just process that mockup slowly but surely. The first thing it's going to do is check to make sure we have these layers before it will actually load into the system. Okay, the first thing you get to then here is where you can see the design layer. So it says, okay, yes, I recognize that you have an MD image layer and you have an MD color layer. Good, because if you didn't have those, the mockups would not proceed. What do you want to name it? Now you can rename it, anything that makes sense to you. You can rename it here or you can rename it later. And what category is it going in? So obviously ours is clothing for a t-shirt. And now we just say upload mockup. And again, it's going to take just a minute for it to come here. Notice I have all my different mockups over here on the side. And you can search in these mockups too. There's different categories if you want to search for your different mockups. Makes it a little bit easier to find things if you got a lot of different mockups in here. So again, give that just a second to load. And here we go. It should come up. Now sometimes if you see it do all of this and you don't see it appear right away, it should, but occasionally I've seen it not pop up. Look down through your custom mockups and just see if by chance, this is one I had already loaded before. It's probably going to be towards the bottom. And let's see if it came up on its own. But it should also be down here towards the bottom if you need to look for it again if it didn't load up on its own. Okay, but this did come on up for us, and we have the name section again. Again, you can rename it here if you prefer to. Whatever naming convention makes sense for you. The clothing category. Now here's where it's important to link it to a product. So if you want to use this in the publishing process, not just in the listing process, but when you actually publish, if you want to see this mockup there, you have to do this is for publish. So when I click that, it's going to ask me, okay, well, what layers? Let me match up your layers. So my front layer, and I'm going to do for color. So front and color is the typical layers that we are looking at. But what product does this go with? Because if you don't identify a product and match it to a product, then it won't show up in your publishing process. So I will link these to actually everything that says 64,000 on it are Bella and Canvas, because I've seen that if I select the men one here and not the women's, then sometimes it doesn't show up depending on how I added my product. So I make sure that I link it to anything with 64,000. But if you want to link it to the Bella and Canvas, then you also have to add those as well. And again, make sure you add all of the Bella and Canvas options. And you can do other ones too. The Gildan 5000 you can use this t-shirt for. So it can apply to a lot of the basic kind of t-shirts. So I've added it to the products now. I said that I want to use it in the publishing process. And then the rest of the information kind of comes up automatically here. Category, I must have accidentally flipped off of there. Make sure it's still in the clothing category too, so for you. And then you have it enabled so that it will show up on your site. If you don't have it enabled, it's not going to show up in your listing files. And then just hit Save Changes. And you are good to go at that point. So now that we've listed both of these mock-ups, let's see what it looks like in our listings now. So let's go back over here to our listings. We're back on our listing. We have it selected. And now we choose the mock-up symbol again, Image Mockups. And instead of staying in the publics, we are going to go to Custom. And it may be easier to search up here so that you can find it a little faster. And so here's our mock-up, the white tee with the flat lay with the dark wood. Now notice this one shows up here now, and you see that it's just the flat lay without the heather impact. So if you want the heather one, it's saved in another section. Now, if I want to do both of these at one time, just slip on your multi mock-up. Make sure you check mark the mock-ups that you want to use in this listing. So now I have both mock-ups, one that is heather and one that is not. So why have the two separate files? I mentioned this at the beginning of the video. Why do I need two separate ones? Notice here that I do not have the little option to do the heather. If we look at a regular mock-up, you have this toggle for heather shirt or not. So you can choose a color and you can say, okay, make this heather. But with the custom mock-ups, that's just not available for us. And so that is why it's easier to just load two different files. So now if I'm using the non-heathered one, I'm just going to use colors that are associated with the non-heather. And if I'm using the heathered one, then I'm going to use colors associated with that. So let's do a couple of them just to show you how this works at this point. So make sure that you have your file selected that you want to use, and then choose your colors. Black's probably not going to be the best color. So let's do just a white to start with. Oop, helps to spell white correctly. And notice this one's on Gildan 5000. But again, you can do the Bella and Canvas. You can do any colors you want here. Let's do a Bella and Canvas now. Let's do maybe a pretty light blue color. And then let's do a Gildan 64,000. Let's do the navy heather. That's a pretty color. And then if you want to do another one now, I tend to like to use the sport gray in a heather. I know that's not technically called heather, but I feel like the sport gray is a little bit more of a heathered look. So I tend to use the sport gray as well in my heathered mock-up. Okay, so let's see where my mock-ups are going, because I usually have them all over the place. Mock-up 2, mock-up 3, and mock-up 4. I think I had them correct if I'd left them alone to begin with. Still got one that's not in the right place. Mock-up 1, mock-up 2, mock-up 4, mock-up 3 here. There we go. I'll get my error message off. Okay, so I have 4 different places that these mock-ups will be going. I have my non-heathered one in 2 colors, and of course you can add up to 10 different colors here. And then I have my heathered one in 2 colors as well. JPEG settings are all ready to go, and just hit Generate Mockups now. And we'll give that just a second to generate. Now, again, this is in the listing process, so you can generate your mockups in advance, and you can put them in your mockup file sections here. And then if you use them in the publishing process, it's just a little bit different and a little bit more automated for you. Okay, looks like my mockups came up okay here. Let's just open one of those up to show you what it looks like. And there you go. Now you have the colors that are specific to the manufacturers, and you have your mock-up on the shirt ready to go, and it looks fairly realistic, about as realistic as you can get them to look when you're using Photoshop files. And you have all 4 of them. There's the white one. Here's the heathered one. So let's take a look and see if it has a little bit of a heathered look. Yep, notice this slight little heathered look to give it just that little bit of difference. And it's ready to go too. So my mock-ups are all ready to go. So adding your mockup to MyDesigns is actually a pretty easy process once you have the files. And again, these files are ready to go as is, so you can load them just directly into MyDesigns. But if you did want to make some changes, you just save the changes, save that file, and load them again. And you can also save various different versions of them. So if you do another background, then save that as a different PSD file, give it a name for the different background. So you can make several mockups out of just this one PSD file if you want to. And last piece, then let me show you the publishing process, and then we'll be about done. Thanks for staying around this long for me. I know it's a bit of a long tutorial. But if I want to publish this now, so let's go to publish. Let's just use a public profile for a second here. Multi-products, definitely don't need candles. Yeah, let's just do the multi-product one here. So I'm going to load that profile. Maybe I'll do it. I will do another tutorial soon about all the different profiles and stuff too for us. So once we load our file, then you notice that it's generating the mockups for the ones that came with this profile. But if I don't want to use that mockup, I want to use my custom mockup, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say add mockup. And it's usually going to be at the very bottom, but you'll find your mockups. I've kind of added this one a few times. You'll find your mockups at the bottom. So I'm going to add both of those for now. And now I can select the different colors. I'm going to turn these other ones off just so you can see just my mockups here. And I'm just going to delete the other products to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so this is the Bella and Canvas shirt specifically. I've selected these different colors, and then I just want to select, make sure I coordinate the non-heathered with the heathered. So this one's non-heathered white, cream, peach. Oh, actually a heather peach. So I don't want to select that one. Pink, light blue, and athletic heather. So I want to go down here to my heathered file for athletic heather and heather peach. And they will start to come up for us here. Here's our different files. There's the, I think that's the light blue, the cream, or is it cream? Or yeah, cream, the pink, light blue. Oh, this one's the gray, I think, first. It's hard to see after a while. You can see the heathered one here too. Remember the athletic heather and the heather peach. So there you go. Those are all now going to be part of the publishing process. Again, now you see why we need both the heather and the non-heathered, because you don't have a way to toggle that on and off. So you just want to select the colors that are specific to whether they are heathered or non-heathered, and that will be ready to go. That should be everything you need to know to be able to use these PSD files. You now know how to make some minor changes to the files if you want to. You can export those as a JPEG, and you can do that with the image or as a plain mockup that you can use in another tool. And you can load these directly up into MyDesigns, and now they will be listed under your custom mockups, and you can use those in the listing process and in the publishing process. I hope that's all pretty clear. If you have any questions, please comment down below. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and going over this mockup tutorial. If you would like more information like this, please like and subscribe. It does help me out, and I will be adding some links down below. I am affiliate for MyDesigns. I don't have anything for a discount for you, unfortunately. I'll maybe try to get that in the future, but it does help me in the long run to be able to bring more content like this to you. I will also be making more MyDesigns tutorials so that I can kind of go through all of the process of MyDesigns, just to give you a little help in understanding all the vast functionality that is available in MyDesigns. So have a great day, and I appreciate your support.